Hello and welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines in the southeast. Dozens feared dead in the Channel as a migrant dinghy sinks between Calais and Dover. We are live with the latest.
Battle lines are drawn as Green campaigners in Sussex pledge to stop Centre Parks developing a new resort in an area of outstanding natural beauty.
Tony, at this point in time you are under arrest.
The moment a bomb hoaxer was arrested. Tonight, Anthony Collins from Chatham, whose actions closed a COVID vaccine factory, is in jail.
And are you a first-time buyer in the southeast? The property is being bought with billions from the bank of mum and dad. Good evening. A rescue operation is underway in the Channel between Calais and Dover tonight. It's reported dozens of migrants have died while trying to cross in an inflatable dinghy.
The boat went down off the coast of Calais. French police say as many as 30 bodies have been recovered. Live now to Dover and our reporter Sarah Saunders. Terribly sad, Sarah. What more can you tell us, please?
Well, it's thought that up to 40 people might have been aboard that inflatable dinghy that has sunk off the French coast. The alarm was originally raised by French fishermen, one of whom saw one dinghy with migrants aboard, another floating with no people on it, but people floating in the water. It was originally thought the death toll might be around 5 people, but sadly over the last hour or so that has been consistently revised upwards. It now stands at around 29 or 30. Well, the French Interior Minister spoke of his deep emotion. He is headed toward Calais where the rescue operation is going on. The French Prime Minister has spoken of this as a tragedy. Today, migrant welfare groups told us that they have long feared an incident on this scale.
Absolute shock and horror. There's never been anything of this magnitude in the Channel before, and the thought that people who have suffered so much, who have probably escaped from horrific situations, to get all this way and then die at our border is tragic beyond words. It really is. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
And Sarah, presumably this operation will continue throughout the night.
Yes, it looks as though it will. Both British and French authorities have been involved in this rescue operation. They've been using helicopters and Coast Guard vessels, but of course it is now dark and it's getting colder. But the rescue operation does continue in the hope that the death toll will not continue to rise. However, it's thought there are still at least 5 people missing.
An absolute tragedy. Sarah Saunders in Dover. Thank you.
And it's now been announced that Boris Johnson will chair a meeting in response to this tragedy. Let's cross to our parliamentary correspondent, David Wood. The sense of shock in Dover is being echoed at the highest levels tonight, David.
I think it's fair to say that, Sangeeta, that emergency government Cobra meeting, as it's called on Whitehall, started around an hour ago. The Prime Minister will be chairing it, and I think that gives a sense of the seriousness that he will want to be seen to be getting a grip of this situation himself. We'll never find out exactly who is sitting around that Cabinet office room table, but almost certainly the Home Secretary will be there. Also the Minister for Immigration and Migration, with particular focus on the Channel. We also know there's the clandestine Channel Commander, which is a government appointment of a former military man whose job it is to liaise with the French authorities to try and limit the number of crossings. He's almost certainly likely to be there too. There'll also be representatives of the Ministry of Defence as well as other government agencies. And we have had many warnings, haven't we, over the past few years about how dangerous the crossing is, particularly in cold times and particularly as we head into winter with earlier, darker nights. And this is a worry that the government has had, but actually the Home Secretary Priti Patel is coming under increasing pressure, and it's really been building here during the past week or so in Westminster. There is growing anger amongst MPs, particularly MPs who represent a number of Kent constituencies, and they're getting increasingly angry that the Home Secretary talks a lot, talks very tough about trying to end these crossings, trying to stop the boats leaving the French beaches and starting that very dangerous journey 22 miles or so across the channel. But what MPs want to see is more action. They believe the Home Secretary wants to stop it, but they are getting incredibly angry that actually that doesn't seem to be happening. Tonight, Labour says that now politicians must redouble their efforts to prevent people risking their lives in these perilous journeys. I think tomorrow there will be an update in the House of Commons about exactly what the government is doing and giving MPs the very latest on the situation just off the French coast. But certainly here tonight, a lot of concern. We expect to hear from Boris Johnson in the next hour or so about what he's hoping to do in the short term to prevent more deaths on channel crossings, but also a lot of anger. A lot of MPs want these crossings to stop altogether.
David Wood, Westminster, thank you. I think we can hear from Boris Johnson now.
My thoughts and sympathies are, first of all, with the victims and their families, and it's an appalling thing that they have suffered. But I also want to say that this disaster underscores how dangerous it is to cross the Channel in this way, and it also shows how vital it is that we now step up our efforts to break the business model of the gangsters who are sending people to sea in this way.
And we've also had reaction from the Dover MP, Natalie Elphick, who is calling for a change of policy.
There are safe and legal routes to the UK. This is about people smuggling. It's about the trade in smuggling people unlawfully into the UK, and that's what needs to be tackled. And people smugglers do not care about the lives they put at risk, and we've seen today with horrendous consequences what happens when you're in the hands of people smugglers in wintry, dangerous seas in these treacherous conditions. It needs to be tackled to save lives, and the best way to save lives is to keep people safe in France and not let them get into these dangerous boats in the hands of people who do not care if they live or die.
All coming up on the National News, and you can keep up to date with all developments on our website.
Well, on to other news now, and £350 million plans to create a centre parks in Sussex would destroy an irreplaceable landscape, according to 5 environmental groups who've come together to oppose the plans.
The holiday resort would be built in an area of outstanding natural beauty and woodlands south of Crawley at Old House Warren, 550 acres in all.
Well, Centre Parks say they take the ecology of forests extremely seriously, as James Dunham now reports.
Behind this row of trees is where the resort would be built. This is Centre Parks' vision: hundreds of lodges, swimming pools and a spa, family fun, or a threat to wildlife, say campaigners.
I'm sure that Centre Parks can very sensitively and with a lot of experience knock down a lot of trees, but this is an ancient woodland. It's been here for 400 or more years, probably a lot longer than that, and you simply cannot cut down swathes of ancient woodland over a 553-acre site.
The fear is that trees would be brought down and breeding areas for rare birds such as goshawks and firetits destroyed.
Ancient woodlands are one of our richest terrestrial habitats. They're home to so many different sensitive species, and a lot of the time these species are really vulnerable. They're really sensitive to change, and they rely on ancient woods as their habitat. They can't live elsewhere. They need these places for their survival.
Centre Parks told us, we take our responsibility to the environment and forests extremely seriously. We have more than 30 years' experience of sensitively managing the woodlands in which our villages are located, carefully nurturing and maintaining the forests to protect and enhance biodiversity. From an economic perspective, Crawley needs as much investment as it can get. The town has been one of the hardest hit by the pandemic because of its employment links to Gatwick Airport. Centre Parks say their plans would bring 1,500 jobs.
We really need it because it's been so impacted by COVID that we need another source of income, really.
Organisers of the park could replant trees somewhere else instead of just destroying them here.
I think it'd be good to create the jobs and things like that, but I think the overall picture of hospitals, roads, congestion, I think needs to be seriously looked at to compensate for the new big fixtures.
It's time
Center Parcs promotes itself as an outdoor resort. Environmentalists say they are not against a new holiday destination, just as long as it's not built here. James Dunham, ITV News.
A robber who waited in an alleyway to steal a woman's handbag in Gravesend has been jailed. Jaroslav Gabor cycled up to his victim along the high street and grabbed her bag. The woman in her 60s fell to the ground, suffering hip and leg injuries. Gabor was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months.
A teenager has been given a life sentence with a minimum of at least 20 years after murdering a man in Ashford. 18-year-old Osita Alekbaso stabbed Jayton McFarlane in March last year. The attack was a result of gang rivalry. CCTV shows Alekbaso and his associates, Joseph Matimba and Hassan Tajan, at a takeaway where the teenager changed his clothes after the murder. Matimba was given an 18-month sentence. Tajan has been jailed for 1 year.
A fire at Ramsgate Museum is believed to have been started deliberately. Kent Fire and Rescue were called to the Royal Harbour last night following reports of a fire in a section of the building. Fire crews commended museum staff for closing internal doors, which stopped it from spreading. No one was injured.
With 1 week left until the end of a consultation on Gatwick's plans for a new runway, people are being asked for their views again. The airport in Sussex says bringing the northern runway into regular use will generate an extra 18,000 jobs in the local area. Campaigners against the idea say it would increase noise and air pollution.
A bomb hoaxer is behind bars tonight after sending a suspect package to a factory that was making the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Production at the factory in North Wales had to be halted in January this year after receiving the parcel from Anthony Collins from Chatham. Tony Green was at Maidstone Crown Court.
January this year, and production here of the AstraZeneca vaccine that saves lives is halted by a bomb scare. A suspect package sent by this man, Anthony Collins, a man described as having an obsession with the pandemic. X-rays of the package, daubed with scribblings and a photograph of 2 nurses, showed equipment that could have been used in a bomb. But it was harmless. Also inside, a supermarket receipt that detectives traced to Collins, shopping near his home in Chatham. It led to his arrest.
Tony, at this point in time you are under arrest, okay? Right, give me a second and we will explain all. You're under arrest on suspicion of a hoax bomb call.
Maidstone Crown Court was told he'd also sent packages to 10 Downing Street, a lab in Wuhan and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He'd also sent a package to Kent Police in 2018, who'd arrested him and then released him. Today, a judge jailed him for 27 months. Kent Police welcomed the sentence.
Sending bomb hoax packages will not be tolerated, certainly by Kent Police and not the courts.
Obviously, he's no stranger to this kind of behaviour, and he sent a package to Kent Police, and although he was interviewed, he was never charged. Do you think that, in retrospect, was that the right decision?
Based on the circumstances, yes, because they're 2 completely different investigations. He's amended and updated his presentation to make it look suspicious.
Dismissing his defence as absurd, the judge told Collins, "The fact is, by your own admission, you are an attention seeker and you wanted your package to be treated as a potential bomb. As you were keen to point out, you're an intelligent man, and as such you knew what you were doing and you knew what the likely consequences would be. Your intentions were clearly malevolent."
Collins has been in custody since January, meaning he will be released on licence early next year. Tony Green, ITV News, Maidstone Crown Court.
The majority of people who applied for compensation after the Windrush scandal first emerged 4 years ago have yet to receive any money. That's according to a new report from the Home Affairs Committee. It's after some people who moved to the UK from the Caribbean decades ago were wrongly deemed to have been living and working here illegally. Some were deported. The Home Office says it remains steadfast in its commitment to ensure those affected receive every penny of the compensation they're entitled to.
4 years on, only 5% of those eligible for compensation have actually received any. That is completely wrong and just shows the system really isn't working well enough. That's why we need this urgent reform.
One of the Kent Showground's biggest annual events, the Winter Wonderland, has been cancelled. Phoenix, who were due to organise the extravaganza, say rising COVID levels means it can't go ahead. Last year, huge queues built up around the event at Detling.
A tiger at the Big Cat Sanctuary at Smarton in Kent has sadly died. 18-year-old Nias arrived at the centre when he was just 1. He played a vital role in protecting his species, which is critically endangered, by having 4 cubs and many grand cubs. Keepers say he was captivating, beautiful and will be deeply missed. Now, the first openly gay Chief Constable has called for more visible role models in policing to help attract recruits from diverse backgrounds.
Speaking exclusively to ITV Meridian, Adrian Hunstock said attitudes within the force had been transformed since he joined in the 1980s, but that improving representation remains an ongoing challenge.
The senior officer, who lives near Tunbridge Wells, was joined on his final patrol before retirement by our reporter Kit Bradshaw.
Lots of those operations when I was sort of young in service, I thought, all right, I want to be on a squad, I want to be a detective.
Heading out on the beat one last time. After a 37-year career in uniform, Adrian Hunstock has been reflecting on how far policing has come since he joined up.
It was a risk back in the mid-80s. Anybody who was different, in my case being gay, was just never something that matched policing. And so I really had second, third, fourth, fifth thoughts. I thought, well, do you know what, I'll give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? I can leave after 2 or 3 years if it becomes a problem. Thankfully, it wasn't a problem. But that's not to say it's not had its challenge along the way.
Earlier this year, he is thought to have become the first gay man to hold the rank of Chief Constable when he took charge of the British Transport Police.
How would you summarise how far the police service as a whole has come in terms of its approach to diversity within its ranks?
I think in some areas policing has moved tremendously. LGBT matters seem much more mainstream now. I still think we've got to do more though to reassure and reinforce with black communities in particular that they can have a successful career in policing, and actually that we need their experience and life skills and understanding.
Nationally, 92.4% of police officers are white, compared to 86% of people in the general population, while 32.4% of officers are female, compared to 51% in wider society.
When I first started out in policing, and there wasn't anybody like me.
On his last patrol before handing back his warrant card, Mr. Hunstock, who lives near Tunbridge Wells, wanted to meet some of the next generation of police recruits.
It's very important to have people from the minority background so that people don't feel alienated, to understand the community and police that community as well.
So many different people, they'll come to you with problems. We've had people come to us with problems about not wanting to come out to parents. I think I identify as this, but I'm scared. And to have someone that you work with that can go, I've been through this, in the uniform as well, it really does help the community.
And at a time when the culture of policing is under immense scrutiny, this history-making officer believes greater diversity within the force is needed now more than ever.
Whether you're gay or a woman in policing or black or minority ethnic, all of these factors help create a more representative culture, but a more professional culture.
Kit Bradshaw, ITV News, London Bridge.
And all the best to Mr. Hunstock. Now, parents and carers are expected to offer up a record amount of money to help their children onto the property ladder this year. That's according to a new report.
Yes, experts predict the so-called Bank of Mum and Dad will play a part in almost half of all first-time buyer transactions, helping their offspring out to the tune of almost £10 billion this year alone.
Wow. It's thought rising house prices and stricter lending criteria could be to blame. Matt Price has the story.
There are few things that signal the start of adulthood more so than buying your first home. A step on the property ladder and a place to call your own. It's something first-time buyer Anna has been wanting for years, but it wouldn't have been possible without some financial help from Mum.
I wanted to be able to get onto the property ladder and sort of start making a home. I'm 34 years old now, and you know, it's something that sort of crept up on me age-wise. So I started looking for houses around here and suddenly realised that actually paying a mortgage was going to be cheaper than paying rent every month. It was just a matter of getting a deposit to put down on the house that was the problem.
Anna proudly bought the house on her own, which made things even more expensive.
It is really difficult for youngsters to get onto that housing ladder, especially if you're single or you don't have a dual income coming in.
One study claims support from the so-called Bank of Mum and Dad will hit a new high this year, helping almost half of all first-time buyer transactions. It's thought parents will offer up almost £10 billion in 2021. Over the past 10 years, almost 1.4 million first-time buyers have been supported with gifts and loans. Financial experts in Ashford would always err on the side of caution. The advice: any loan or gift should be well thought through.
First off, can they afford it? Do their kids actually need the money? Some do, most do, some don't. But you've got to think about where you're going to fund it from, where's the money going to come from that you want to provide for them. Are you going to give it to them in the form of a gift? Are you going to give it to them in the form of a loan? Where you're going to access the cash from yourself? Do you need it? Do you want it back?
This year's expected to represent a peak in family support. The government's Help to Buy scheme will be withdrawn from March 2023. Those behind the study know why so many first-time buyers need assistance.
Rising house prices, a shrinking pool of suitably priced properties to buy, and tight lending criteria that's been in place since 2014 under the Mortgage Market Review, and restrictions on higher loan-to-value mortgages. That means that many first-time buyers need support to purchase their first home.
Anna has spent the last few months dog-proofing her new pad with the addition of spaniel puppy Ralph, but is now pleased she has a place that she can finally call home. Matt Price, ITV News.
Andrew Pate there with our roundup. Now, during lockdown, when restaurants were closed, many set themselves up for takeaway and delivery services instead. And it seems those changes are having a lasting impact.
Indeed, yes. Those sales at some of our leading food chains are now more than double what they were before the pandemic. And experts say the fact that more of us are ordering in extra food at home hasn't reduced how much we're eating out either.
As James Webster reports, restaurants in our region say they are feeling the benefits.
Eating in, for some, is the new eating out. It means kitchens like these are getting busier, dishing up food not just to serve inside the restaurant, but to send out to people's homes too. Kitchens like this one in Hove, which worked to develop its delivery service during lockdown.
People have got used to ordering at home now, and ordering at home has become an occasion. I think people are more and more time poor, working, and they want to go home and have some quality food, and they've got used to that.
The latest figures show that takeaway and delivery services more than doubled over the last 2 years. They're now 130% higher than they were in September 2019, and they're 35% higher than they were in 2020. Food to be eaten off the premises now accounts for 29% of sales from the companies involved in the research.
I think the size of the growth was a slight surprise, so we knew it was here to stay. We spoke to consumers through the pandemic, but I think given that restaurants have opened again, for those sales still to be so high, I think is telling something really that it's here to stay.
This pizza restaurant has always offered delivery, but it became the sole focus of the business when eating in wasn't an option.
People like to eat out, and all of a sudden that was taken away from them, so they wanted another channel for which to have food from outside, because suddenly everyone was cooking 3 to 4 times a day for their kids, their family, and it became hard. So we were an outlet for them, and by staying open, where a lot of places did close, I think we acquired a lot of new customers, and it meant that as we went through lockdown and went back into open restaurants, those customers that had tried us the first, second, third time came back and became regular dining customers as well.
The food here has won awards, and catering for customers on and off the premises is equally important.
I don't think we'd see delivery as something that competes with our dining customers, because on a daily basis, you know, you might be at home on a Tuesday and you just want to get a takeaway. On a Friday night when you're out with your mates, you want to go out and have some beers and have a pizza.
For some restaurants, offering takeaways and deliveries was their only way to survive during lockdown. Now, it is a slice of the market they don't intend on giving up. James Webster, ITV News.
Oh, I've seen some pizzas in my life, you know,
No,
but
they look
they
really,
take the biscuit.
They do. They look very nice.
I feel so hungry, don't you?
I know, it's almost dinner time. Isn't it?
First, though, we better take a look at the weather forecast. It could be serious. Amanda Houston.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Hello again. Hope you've all had a lovely day so far. Well, the weather's certainly been fairly quiet in recent days, but it's looking much more unsettled as we go through the rest of this week. And that's because low pressure pretty much firmly in charge of things. As you can see here, at times there will be systems coming our way, bringing some showers or outbreaks of rain. And you can see the squeeze and the isobars too. It's going to be pretty windy out there, especially as we go into the later part of Saturday. And those winds coming in from a northerly direction mean it's going to be feeling pretty cold too. Now, in the meantime, for the rest of this evening and tonight, it's fairly quiet out there. Still one or two showers lingering around coastal areas, but for most of us, dry for a time. But then we've got a cold front sinking its way southward. So as we wedge through the small hours, for a time it will turn cloudy with a few splashes of light rain in places. And then behind that, the skies will clear. That will allow the temperatures to tumble and maybe a touch of frost in places too. So it certainly will be a cold start today, tomorrow morning first thing, but any cloud will soon shift out of the way, and for most of us it is looking absolutely glorious. Blue skies, lots of sunshine, but you certainly will need to wrap up tomorrow. We've got northerly winds, and that wind will take the edge off the temperatures. Highs there between 6 and 8 degrees, and the sea states are slight. And speaking of which, here are your tide times. You can see we've got high tide at Brighton at 2 o'clock in the morning, and again around 2:10 in the afternoon. So looking further ahead then on Friday, well, it starts off not too bad, but we will see some rain arriving later. Could be a little bit of a wintry flavour in there. And as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be turning very windy, especially on Saturday.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
And in just a moment, the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale with the very latest on the tragic events that are unfolding in the Channel tonight.
Stacey Poole has our late news, but for now, from the team here at ITV Meridian, thank you very much indeed for watching. Enjoy your evening and take care.
Take care, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.